we're so caught up in how people express their art or how they choose to live their lives that we don't even see how our opposition, how those who don't mean us well are pitting us against one another.
Welcome to a movement of kindness and empathy. You're listening to Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. Embarking on a mission to unite our city under the banner of compassion, we're one among 440 cities around the globe standing together to build a more compassionate world. Now introducing the man leading the charge, your host, Will Rucker.
Welcome to Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. I'm your host, Will Rucker, and we've got a very amazing guest joining us for this episode. We're going to talk about democracy. We're going to talk about change. We're going to talk about what comes next and so much more. So with that, I'd like to welcome Quentin Savwoir to the podcast. Hello.
What's going on, Will Rucker? How are you, my friend?
You know, I am doing just fine. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I really can't complain. It's hot and there's a lot of crazy in the world, but I've been on my meditation and journal writing. So I'm trying to keep it all together.
I love it. Starting us off with 2 self-care practices. That is fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I'm so glad we were able to get together for this episode. It's been such a privilege getting to know you over the past few years and to work with you in various capacities. And so I just want to dive into really what it's like being you. And I want our audience to get to know you a little bit better, but to set the bar, to level set, to get our foundation going, I want to hear from you how you define compassion.
That's a great question. What a great way to start. I think compassion starts with care. I scream from this bailiwick a lot about how there's a real void of care in our community, void of care in healthcare. Quite literally, you see Black women dying at disproportionate rates. There's a devastating story out of Georgia recently where a doctor did something extremely vile to a child that was being born, and that child was not born alive. And I don't even want to repeat it because it's so heinous. But I think that there's a void in care, even in just speaking to one another. I am amazed that when I'm out and about, the teeth I have to pull just to get a random stranger to smile and wave back at me when I say, hi, good afternoon. I think that the world we've created, driven by technology, has driven us into our partisan corners or our niche corners where we only talk to those that agree with us and aren't interested in challenging the ideas that we have about things that are happening outside of the things we're comfortable with. So when I think about compassion, I think about care, and I think we could do a much better job at caring for one another.
There's so much in that because, yeah, it really does come down to care. And I wonder if people have kind of exhausted their care. I mean, I won't pretend like we didn't just come through an entire pandemic that shut the world down, something that really no one on the planet had experienced before. And so I just wonder if maybe it's our care that has created some of those barriers, perhaps.
That is a good way to put it. I hadn't thought about it that way. I think about the void of care being tied to this like American ideology that, we can just pick ourselves up by our bootstraps and like we are all independently made. That is a trope, and I call it American propaganda, quite honestly, because no one does anything alone. Even the business that's created for a singular individual is made possible by the amenities that they've enjoyed to get that far, right? So it is these collective things that we've done as human society in this country that have created opportunities for businesses to start and thrive. So I wonder how much of the care piece we just taking it on to be, well, I don't need anyone to care about me. I can do it. But that's really not true. This grand experiment that we have in this country is only made possible through caring for one another and being compassionate for one another and available for one another.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think it's a bit delusional to think that anyone could really survive on their own. I do an exercise in some of my coaching masterminds where I say, okay, imagine you're the only person on the planet. Now what? And just really a thought experiment, because when people really stop to think about it, it's like, oh my gosh, no, we need each other. And I want to be with other people. Like, I'm an introvert by nature. And even I am like, oh, it's time to get around some people.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, you got to be careful. Delusion's running high. So between that delusion and the audacity, it is pretty wild. I think that social media have played a big factor in this idea of, well, I can just do it myself because you have this world online where you interact with people, but you don't really interact with people. And I think about when I was a child and my dad being a labor leader, my dad organized people through having conversations with them. And sometimes they were hard conversations. Sometimes they were arguments. Sometimes they cussed each other out, but they came back to it, right? They didn't walk away from the idea or the challenging conversation at hand. They just agreed to disagree and would move forward. Today you have a disagreement with somebody and they're ready to pull up on you with a gun. And it's just like, that's not the way civilized people live. So how do we overcome this idea that it's just us and we only need us? We need each other. It takes a village. That's an African proverb, but it actually is quite applicable to the dire straits that we find our country in today.
Yeah. And you remind me, even with social media, when we get into an argument or a disagreement or we see something we don't like, the first answer is, well, then block me. If you don't like what I'm posting, block me. And so these barriers to authentic dialogue, I grow in conversation with folks I disagree with. And that's what really strengthens my core beliefs and my values, is by examining those that I don't hold. So, with that, you hold a number of roles, and you are such a instrumental piece of the next generation of our communities. So, just high level, what are the 15, 11 jobs you got?
Oh goodness, my 4 jobs that are all free. How'd I end up with 4 free jobs? I messed that up bad. It's a privilege to be the president of the Las Vegas NAACP. I made a Facebook post. I remember being introduced to the NAACP from my grandmother. She took me to a national conference as a kid, and she still speaks very highly of the association and beams with pride in the legacy of the progress that the association is how it's referred, has protected and preserved for 114 years. And I remember being so bored out of my mind in those breakout sessions all those years ago, to now be the leader of a branch in charge of some things at a very pivotal time in our country's history. It is very much full circle moment. I never thought that would be the way, but here we are. And it's very exciting. The NAACP is thriving and it is alive and well. The worries I have about the association are worries that we see in our ecosystem, largely with the passing of the torch to a new generation of leaders. And we have a lot of leaders that are still putting in a lot of incredible work. I think about Dr. Hazel Dukes, who's the state conference president in New York. But Ms. Hazel's also 91 years old. So I start to think about, well, where's the mentorship? Where is the teaching of? And I'm not saying that this doesn't exist, right? I'm sure that she has mentored countless people in her years of advocacy and service to the world. But I just wonder what the holdup is in making sure that the next generation of leaders has what it takes to assume the leadership roles, because the things that we've been doing haven't changed the issues that we're having. We're very much still living in a world that our forefathers and forefathers fought back against in the 50s and 60s and 70s. I was talking to my dad, and I wasn't around at this time, but my dad speaks about how during the 60s, all the advances we made in civil rights, we found that in the 70s, there was a backlash to that. And he refers to this moment in time, to that moment in time where we see the rollback of some of our civil rights and civil liberties. So for me, it's really an honor to be president at this time, because it feels like a Janet Jackson song, Made for Now, right? Like Janet's my girl. So I listen to Made for Now. It keeps me fueled up. So that's my big community job. I'm also vice president of my fraternity chapter, Theta Pi Lambda of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Alpha has changed my life. I'm actually new in the fraternity. I'm less than 2 years in, and Alpha has opened my brain up and lifted my confidence to understand that I'm limitless in this world. And you need that type of understanding of confidence in yourself if you're going to lead a civil rights organization like the NAACP. I also work at Run for Something. That's my day job. That's what pays the bills. I help recruit young people to run for office across all 50 states. My project specifically is about finding pro-democracy election administrators. Those are the folks that are in charge of running elections and making sure that our systems maintain and are integral as we select those that should lead our communities. So those are like my three big jobs. What else do I also do? I'm also involved with CEIC. I'm the vice president of CEIC. That's Cannabis Equity Inclusion Community. It's a grassroots policy group that's working to change the political and policy landscape of cannabis laws in the state of Nevada. 20 years ago, you had a little bit of weed on you, they're going to kick in your door and take your daddy to jail for 30 years. But now we have figured out how to make it a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's okay. So our organization's position is that we want the business opportunities to be just as equitable and available to the people in the communities that were destroyed because of this plant 20 years ago today. What else do I do? Those are the biggest things, I think, Will.
Well, I
Just
think
all around community servant. I don't like getting my hands dirty,
that is enough, my friend. That is more than
No, for real.
And I'm going to circle all the way back to that first role you mentioned and just share why you say NAACP instead of NAACP.
I say NAACP because when I say NAACP or when I've heard other people say NAACP, our young people don't hear the double A. They hear W. Or there have been some adult men, some of my peers that hear NCAA. And I'm like, no, we got it wrong. Ida B. Wells is not pleased. Ida B. Wells is one of the founders of the NAACP. So I say NAACP so that people understand exactly what the acronym is. But also, fun fact, and this is kind of new, the association is actually rebranding itself and getting away from the full use of National Association for the Advancement of Colored People and just going by the letters NAACP. And apparently this is a vestige, and this has been the thing for a couple years now, but the straw that broke the camel's back was a couple weeks ago on the floor of the House of Representatives. One of the Republican congressmen from like Georgia in his remarks referred to colored people, and the whole Democratic side was like in an uproar, and they wanted it struck from the record and so on and so on. But then his retort was, well, you have a whole organization that refers to colored people. Of course, we know that we can say it. You can't say it, but that wasn't a suitable answer. So the National Association, which this was already underway before this happened, the National Association is rebranding to just be NAACP.
So I did not know that latter piece, but yeah, I think it's important that people understand what it means, where it stems from, and of course, where I really want to get to where it's going. So with your multitude of endeavors, the consistent thing that I do here really is community. And so equity seems to be a cornerstone, perhaps, of everything that you do, whether it's cannabis or I'm going to say it, colored people, right? Kind of where we're going with it, that equity piece seems to be clear for you. As a individual that is what I call a multi-minority, I'm sure you've experienced drama from every side, whether it's in your leadership or it's just in being a part of a community. Tell me a little bit about how you deal with maintaining your ardent commitment to change and drama.
That's a great question, Will. I think so I'm being like real vulnerable here. What I've realized in like these last couple weeks is like my steadfastness to community is really anchored in like selfishness. It's like an addiction for me. I grew up, my dad was married. So my dad wasn't in the house. So I was the man of the house with my mom and my sisters. So I was always picking up the slack. I was always tying down the loose ends. It's ingrained in me to need to always be doing something. So as an adult with no kids and a real heart for community and making sure that the experiences that I had as a young person aren't matriculated down to new generations, I just show up. I stay out of the drama because I know that the drama is just there to distract me. It's intended to get me to be frustrated with being of service to my people, because this is a free job. This job pays in gray hair, which if I get close enough, you could probably see it. It pays in sleepless nights and weight gain. It does not pay. It occasionally pays in, my treasurer said a couple weeks ago, she said, I'm just so proud to be a part of this with y'all. Sometimes I get those kind of checks, and those checks matter. Like, that really feels good. I had another branch member tell me recently, I'm really glad to be on y'all's team. Like, that's a real like someone vouching for you in that way and believing in your vision and the things you're trying to do. That goes a real long way. But the haters, they're going to be there. And I know that. And I make sure not to give it too much energy, because when you're doing work out of the goodness of your heart, it's easy to pack up and walk away. So I don't get caught up in the distractions, because the distractions are intended to make me feel hopeless in my people and what's possible. And I'm not going to buy that. I'm not going to believe that. I know from which I come. I know that the challenges that have come before are the same challenges today, but we have a blueprint for how to get over them. Further, I have way more resources than our foremothers and forefathers had. So there's no reason that I'm not steadfast and successful. And the only way that I'm not successful is if I choose not to be. Choosing not to be means I'm engaged in the foolery, or I'm engaged with you feeling some type of way about me having a husband, right? Or I'm engaged in you feeling some type of way about me wanting to showcase and bring to the forefront other types of Black folks that exist in our community. I'll tell you a funny story. I was planning our Juneteenth Jubilee block party, and I said, you know what? I would like to see some female impersonators, drag queen. I would like to see a drag queen perform at the Jubilee block party. There is nothing more freeing than a drag queen performing some freedom song, right? Well, you would have thought I said I was going to have, I don't know, the KKK there. Well, what is your agenda? What I'm trying to get my community to understand is that no one is coming to save us. And the longer we bicker and fight amongst one another, the longer it's going to take for us to really rally up and fight back against the extremism that's trying to carry us back to pre-Jim Crow days. We're so caught up in how people express their art or how they choose to live their lives that we don't even see how our opposition, how those who don't mean us well are pitting us against one another. So as a proudly Black gay man, I'm going to be unapologetic in making the audience that this NAACP serves wider, because I know it's going to take an army. My campaign slogan was, it's going to take all of us. And I meant that quite literally. It's going to take all of us to save democracy, to get rent that's affordable, to make sure childcare is within reach and quality, to make sure that Black women aren't dying in childbirth. That's not one person's job. That's all of our jobs. But we are more preoccupied with being upset that baby girl dresses as a drag queen as an artistic expression and makes a little coin on the weekend. Like, that's just crazy. You're more concerned about that than someone trying to take your voting rights. And where that makes sense at.
When we come back, I want to dive into that a bit more deeply and talk about the subject of democracy, because there is an idea that there's a radical left and a radical right, and they're somehow equivalent. And so I want to get your perspective after this.
Others how you'd like to be treated. And that's the golden rule. Camp Anytown has taught me that knowledge is power, and if I utilize my voice, I can make a difference in the world, no matter how big or small.
I learned that as long as we stand together, we can accomplish so much more.
What Camp Anytown has taught me is that I am not crazy to think I can change the world. I'm crazy if I think I can do it alone.
Camp Anytown has taught me that just because I'm different does not mean I don't belong.
I learned at Camp Anytown to be more compassionate, because you never know what somebody else is going through.
Camp Anytown is a no-cost youth leadership camp that trains high school students in diversity, community, and inclusivity. When you choose the Golden Rule license plate, you play a part in a local camp that helps shape a better tomorrow. Learn more at dmvnv.com.
This is Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. I'm Will Rucker, and here today is president of the Las Vegas branch of the NAACP and Quentin Savwoir.
Thank you, Will. That was funny. Yes. And I'm going to get that t-shirt.
Yeah, there we go. So before the break, we were talking about democracy, and I love that you had the expression of drag art in your Juneteenth Jubilee celebration. Like, that is fantastic. I'm a ball kid, so drag has been a part of my life since, I had my adult life. And I do miss it. I never have been a drag performer, but I was a face kid. I walked across the nation.
Hey, look at us.
Yeah, and I was what you call, oh gosh, a star. That was the title. I was trying to become an icon. I never stayed in it long enough to do that. But what I have found, because I'm also a pastor, I've been a pastor for over 20 years and traveled the globe preaching Christianity. And sometimes that's not always congruent with how people view my orientation. So I just find it really, really fascinating that you brought that element into the NAACP. And how I want to tie this to democracy is, I had a conversation with someone who is a nonpartisan, and they were saying, well, you know what? I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm against the far left and the far right. And I asked them, like, well, how do you define the far left? Because I don't really see them as equivalent entities. And unfortunately, the explanation he gave me was basically pronouns and sexuality. Well, the far left wants to be able to have fluid gender identities. And I'm like, okay, even if that's the case, like, is that really the same as the far right teaching that slavery was beneficial for the enslaved? Like, these were different battles to me. So I want to hear your perspective on all of that.
Listen, slavery was not a workforce development program. When I heard that, I was like, man, we really are living in the last days. Your grandparents say, no, we in our last days. I was like, yep, this is it. I wrestle with that myself. Honestly, I don't see the things that I talk about as being radical left. When I talk about the importance of there being pro-worker policies that center families, that make sure that moms don't have to work 3 jobs to pay rent. When I talk about that being in par with us having an economically friendly landscape for businesses to come to Nevada and build, those things go hand in hand to me. Those things should not be competing interests, right? The idea that rent should be affordable. Everyone needs housing. Everyone wants to raise their kids in housing, right? Like, there's just some basic fundamental human needs that we can all agree we would want. But yet and still, we have made these things commodities and out of reach for certain people. So the idea of rent being attainable and people being able to be safe in a home, I don't characterize that as radical. And the fact that we've gotten to a place in our politics, in our public discourse, where it's described that way, lets you know how urgent it is that you get involved in the fight today. What the right is doing is rewriting history and banning books and any other number of things that, if you just look a couple years back through history in other countries, you see where this road leads. So when folks try to position what the right is doing and compare that to Black Lives Matter, those two things are not the same. You are not comparing the same thing. The Black Lives Matter movement is a movement that's outlining people who want to see Black people have whole, full, thriving lives and not be concerned with the worry of dying in a routine traffic stop or dying in their home because an officer knocks on the wrong door, or any other number of anecdotes that we've heard of Black people being killed at the hands of law enforcement or random white people who feel threatened by the presence of Black life. So when we talk about defending Black people from being unnecessarily killed, that's not the same as what the extreme right is doing in trying to make sure that your vote doesn't count, or in trying to make sure that you don't have rights when you go to the hospital. It's so crazy to me how the right has been able to weave this web of, we are pro-Christian, pro-family, but small government, but we're going to tell you what to do with your body. Like, y'all don't hear how crazy this is, but they have a whole army of folks that buy this and believe this. And what I've deduced, and I think that it's a good hypothesis, is that they see that the ethnic landscape of America is changing. And you can Google search, what will the average person in America look like in 2045? And it will be a person of color, right? So all these aggressive efforts to restrict women's bodies, I think, is twofold. One, the highest number of abortions come from Caucasian women. Like, that's a fact. I'm not making that up. You can research that. So if you are saying certain women can't, or women can't get abortions, or certain women can't get abortions, we know that wealthy people will find a way to get abortions in states where it's permissible. So what happens with this is you create a permanent underclass of folks that are already struggling. Black women don't earn what their white male counterparts earn or what their white female counterparts earn. But the Black woman in Alabama who cannot get an abortion and cannot afford to travel to Alabama or the nearest state adjacent to her to get an abortion is forced to have that child. That's what I'm talking about when I say thus creating this permanent underclass of people in this country. So you can't compare apples and oranges with me. Now, is there some legitimacy around some of the things that come up when they call the extreme left the extreme left? Yeah, there are some things I think that go too far. I don't know what examples of that would be because I don't listen to those arguments either. I really try to make sure that my messaging and the things that I'm learning and advocating for are for the betterment for people at large and as a whole. When we talk about rent being affordable, that's something that everyone should be able to understand. When we talk about childcare being affordable, how in the world are we going to have a number one economy if we don't have anywhere for people to take their kids, right? We all feel this extreme heat. We just saw what's happened in Hawaii just yesterday. We saw what extreme weather in New York earlier this year yielded with the wildfires from New York. It colored the whole skyline orange. So we have very serious things that the extreme left is concerned about, but we see the consequences of ignoring those things manifesting in real time. So they're not the same to me, quite honestly. The right is preoccupied with restricting rights and harnessing power because they see that they are losing their grip on America. We are protecting the rights that we have earned and expanding them to include more people so that we can really have an America that lives up to her word.
One of the things I hear often is, well, we elected Barack Obama and nothing changed. And so, of course, he was the hope and change guy, right? But I validate everyone's feelings. I think that you're allowed to feel how you feel and your feelings are real. And we also need to look at what's factual, like what actually occurred. And we did shift quite a bit. I think we made a number of shifts. But for the person that feels like their vote doesn't matter, their voice doesn't matter, that things don't change, and even kind of to an earlier point, how we're facing similar struggles to what we faced in the 60s and 70s and, you name it. How do you stay encouraged? What would you tell that person that doesn't want to get involved because they think it doesn't matter?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing I would say is what I always say. If it didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying so hard to take it from you. The saying encouraged part is hard. I'm not gonna lie. It's very hard. My whole life is politics. My whole life is community. It's not a whole lot that I do outside of those spaces. It's hard for me to sit down and watch like a regular movie without me thinking about like, oh, this happens in real life. I need to develop a plan to do that. My husband told me, he was like, it's just a movie. You could chill out. I was like, you're right. But what makes me stay encouraged is when I pause enough to remember the people who've done this before me. One of my little hangout spots, and I haven't been in a while because it's hot in Las Vegas, but I like to just pop up at Legacy Park on the west side. And I just walk around and I just look at all the people who have contributed in some meaningful way to this community and learning about the things that they did. Think about Dr. Ruby Duncan. I think about Brother James McMillan, who's a former NAACP president. I think about Miss Brenda Williams and her husband, James Williams, who was county commissioner. The countless people, Mother Tolan, just the things that they had to endure and go through in order to advance and protect opportunities so that I can sit here and be talking to you today. So that our kids, our community kids can go to a school, right? So I stay encouraged thinking about the things that they had to endure, knowing that I'm not dealing with the exact same challenges that they were dealing with. I just got back from conference season. I went to my fraternity conference. And then I went to the NAACP conference. Now, Alpha started before NAACP. So there's a shared history there in many respects. But thinking about the historical figures that have come through those organizations and been affiliated with both at one point or another, and the things that they won and got through is what keeps me going. It was a decision that was made to be of service and to persevere and to make sure that we were on the right side of history in protecting and advancing civil rights. I can't help but think I can be successful because I have way more tools. I've got this little computer I walk around with every day. I have a car. I have a job that pays me to eat like I eat good. Like, let's be very clear. I don't have to worry about being on the street. I just have such a privileged life that my foremothers and forefathers didn't have. And yet and still they were able to advocate and pass federal policy that would protect my voting rights, protect federal policy that would desegregate schools. So there's nothing in me that says I can't do it. It's just a matter of finding the right people to come along and do it with me. So I'm going to use this as a plug to go to NAACPLasVegas.org in case you are looking for an organizing home. Because that's one of the things one of the elders at the National NAACP conference told me. I said, well, it's hard to get people to do stuff. It's hard to get people to get buy-in because we just all in our corners. And the gentleman said to me, he said, Quentin, that's not a unique challenge. That's an ongoing challenge. He said, but what you do is you keep going anyway. People respond to consistency and eventually the right people just come along. And that hit me like, damn, you're right. So I got back to Las Vegas and I'm like, we're doing this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. I know somebody that might want to do this. And now I'm just feeling like fired up, ready to go. And that's not to say that I don't have some days that I'm like, womp, womp, because yesterday was one of those days. But I know that we will win the way that we have won in the past.
Yeah, you just tap on so many different things in that statement. Community is important to me. And one of the things that I do is I help organizations create cultures that are thriving and to improve morale and to gain buy-in. And I mean, this is stuff I've studied for years, and I still struggle. I'm still like, is this really the right path? So I'm asking two questions kind of in one. One is, our nation is built on the collective voice. So we vote and we move forward based on consensus. That's hard. It's much easier to just tell folks what they're going to do. And I think that all of us are always smarter than any one of us. So there's value in it. The second part of this one question is, with an organization as multifaceted as the NAACP, so you've got health, you've got policy, you've got youth, you've got money. I mean, you've got all of these different components. How do you allow for the individuality to express while still staying focused on that collective mission and not leaving anyone out or excluding any?
Powerful. Can you ask the first part of that question again?
Yeah, with the idea of democracy, just gaining consensus. Gaining consensus is difficult. How do you do that part of it?
Well, I think the first thing is to start with asking people what their experiences are. One of the things that we've taken to do at our branch meetings, I think we did it 2 months in a row, is we are directly asking our community members, what issues are you seeing? There's a lot of folks that, they become president of something or they become the leader of something. And that just means, I know everything. I don't know everything. I know what I read and I know what I know, but I'm not in every single pocket of this valley. So I think the first thing you have to do is be willing to listen. So we are directly soliciting input from our community members about the problems that they see in their communities. And in having discussions about what those problems are, we try to see if that fits within a committee. If it doesn't fit within a committee, we make a committee for it to fit in, because we don't want anyone's problems to go ignored, especially if it's something that can be fixed with just a little bit of people power, right? I'm a firm believer that we can solve a lot of our problems outside of the binary of politics if we were just talk to each other and create buy-in amongst one another. I think another important part of gaining buy-in is having a deep relationship with people. I got a little controversy when I took office because I took our branch meetings back to in-person. I'm not a COVID denier. I recognize that the pandemic, in large part, we are still dealing with that, right? Like COVID cases have ticked up in some areas recently. But I know the power of buying in when you are in person amongst folks. We did COVID meetings as an NAACP branch for the better part of 2 years. And as a member, I felt like I was seeing new people every single virtual Zoom meeting. In person, I know who I'm expecting to see in person. And they're expecting to see those other people that they know are going to be there month over month too. And while that may not mean that we are changing the world tomorrow, we're creating a fondness for one another to create something that could be world changing in 6 months, a year, 2 years, my next term, maybe, right? A large part of buying in is having a deeper connection with someone outside of just the transactional. Hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm good too. All right, see you next time. We have to care. We have to genuinely care without there being any incentive for us on the other side, aside from the incentive that our community is better off with us being in relationship with one another. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to just dive deeper into that and just frame it around the importance of democracy, because what you're talking about, well, if we have a need, we fill it. We add people to that. Democracy doesn't exist without the voice of people. How do you navigate the 7 or 8 billion different perspectives on the planet towards one common cause? And of course, you're dealing with a much smaller scale in Las Vegas, but harnessing all these different perspectives, the ancient wisdom of our elders with the innovation and eagerness of the youth, bringing those together for a pace that is manageable and that everyone can go along with it. How do you put all together?
Well, I think, and I think because I'm like, this is a hypothesis I'm trying, and I'm doing this in all my spaces where I'm really trying hard to make democracy tangible for people. We talk about democracy in these very esoteric ways. And I can remember being a young man thinking that the world as it was is how it would be. And my whole pivot towards democracy came as a result of what I call a terrorist attack on January 6, 2021. 2021? Yes. When we saw extremists attack our Capitol in the name of trying to overturn the election results from the people who said, hey, we want to try something different, Donald Trump. We good on you, right? That's when I was like, oh, well, if we don't have a country, affordable childcare won't matter so much. Like affordable housing won't matter. We'll literally be starting from scratch. Okay, well, my people can't start from scratch right now because we are already at such a deficit. So I think the best way to try to bring people and create buy-in on tactics and strategies to protect democracy is to talk about the ways that democracy shows up in your everyday life. What are the amenities that you enjoy that are a vestige of democracy? Our school district here in Clark County is not the best. We regularly rank close to the bottom on a lot of things. But the mere fact that we have a public school system is a byproduct of democracy. And if we see that school system is not working, the good thing about democracy is you are invited to be engaged and change the rules, change the process of how that thing is run, change a great deal of what is so that it can be better and better serve the community at large. I think so many of us just think that this thing will just be, and that is probably one of our things around American exceptionalism is that we just think it's going to be okay. We're going to be bees knees forever. That's not the case. We could very easily be a third world country that we would otherwise invade and try to protect if we saw the things happening there that we have happen right here in our very own backyard. So if we can make democracy tangible for people, especially young people, especially people from different ethnic backgrounds, then I just happen to think that we can change who's in charge and create a system of governance that's more inclusive of people, that's more mindful of folks. In my job at Run for Something, we go out of our way to try to get out of the traditional party system. For a long time, we would say, oh, I'm going to call the Clark County chair and see who they want to recommend for state senate. And then we are going to help them run for office. No, what we're doing now is we are riding buses. We are going to nail salons. We are going to laundromat. We are talking to people about, hey, have you thought about running for office? Well, I don't think I'm qualified. Here's the thing. We had a whole president who committed like a whole lot of crimes while he was president. So you actually are qualified. So we should try this thing. So getting people to understand like that it's not this A+ AP science experiment that you have to pass. You just have to care. Care is enough to run for office. And I promise you, there's enough me and enough wills to help you figure out how to get over the finish line. And if you don't get over the finish line, you'll at least go down with a strong fight and you'll have a whole army of people behind you ready to do the thing that you're interested in doing. So I just happen to think that if we make the system a little bit less political in nature and make it more plain for people to understand, like, hey, you want this bus to run at a different time of day? That's what the county commissioner does. They have authority over the regional transit center. You should consider running for county commission. Making it accessible for people in ways that make sense to their brain, I think, is how we save democracy. It's not about Joe Biden in 2024, folks. It's going to be about if we have a democracy and if we have a voice in the people that lead this country.
Well, I could go on and on with you for hours. There's so much that we didn't even get to. But before we close out, I want to know what you're listening to. What's on your playlist? I know Janet Jackson. We got Janet Jackson made for now. What else?
You know, Janet. Oh man, that's a great question. I am a 90s R&B kid. I love 90s R&B. That is my safe place. I've been listening to a lot of Nita Baker lately because I bought tickets to go see that show in October. New stuff, I've been listening to Janelle Monáe. I'm a big John Batiste fan. I have been listening to a lot of John Coltrane during my workday because it helps me focus. And I can't say this person's name right. Kaytranda, Kaytranda.
If you ask you're asking the wrong person. I have no idea.
Well, this person's a Canadian artist, and they have a good discography. I really enjoy their music, and of course, all things be like I've been enjoying the Renaissance Proxy. All my friends that have gone because I haven't made it to the show this Sunday, but it's all good.
And then, what are you doing to take care of you? I know you mentioned journaling and meditation earlier, but
Yeah,
that's what you're doing to take care of you.
that's really it, and it's not really helping. I have to do better with the taking care of me part. And honestly, I think, remember earlier I was talking about how my service is, I honestly find kind of a selfish thing, because I think that my service to my people supersedes my service to me. And I think I'm doing it on purpose to not take care of me. And that's something that I'm really working on because that's not good. That's not good. I make myself feel good being of service to someone else while not taking care of my own vessel. So it just dawned on me recently, like, oh, you're keeping yourself busy on purpose because you should be going to the gym, or you should be grocery shopping, or you should be at that therapy appointment so that you can work through your own demons, right? So I'm not doing the best job at the self-care, but the best part about me is when I realize something about myself, I whip into shape to fix it. And intention equals result in my world. So as soon as I get intentional about it, then there will be a change up. So I'm looking forward to that and encouraging others to be on the self-care journey, like consistently. It's not a destination. It's literally a journey. You have to be cognizant. You have to be intentional. You have to explore new things. I tried something a couple weeks ago that I was like, wow, I painted it. I went to a community event and I just sat there and painted. And at the end of 40 minutes without touching my phone, I thought I was crazy. And I was like, actually, this was really good for me because it required me to slow down. It required my brain to just be at peace for a moment and just color a little canvas that was right in front of me. And it was actually the nicest thing I've done for myself that week.
I love it. So trying something new. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm going to stay on you about this self-care. I always encourage the healers and helpers to include themselves in their circle of care. That's so critical.
Thank you.
All
Yes,
right.
sir.
So what's going on with the NAACP? I know you all have some events coming up, so share what's happening.
Yes, we do. We have a lot of good stuff coming up. Our annual Freedom Fund Gala is coming up. We are celebrating our 95th year. The Freedom Fund Gala will be on Saturday, October 21st. It will be at the Paris Hotel Resort and Casino. I'm very, very excited. Our theme this year is remembering, reclaiming, and reimagining our NAACP. I am really trying to create this universal buy-in into our branch as we usher in our 100th year. God willing, I'll be president as we usher in this 100th year. And I want to spend these years walking into that centennial, really building the type of community buy-in that will fortify the programming within this branch and really solidify our political and civil rights power as an organization in this state. The NAACP is the oldest, biggest, and baddest civil rights group. And we have a long way to go to restore how our community should see us and to restore the credibility that we should have with our community. So I'm up for the challenge and I'm willing to do it. So I hope that you can join us at the Freedom Fund Gala. Tickets are $250. It is a fundraiser. Funds generated support the Branch Scholarship Fund, where we provide scholarships to high school seniors and current college students that are branch members. And what else do we have coming up? Our next general member meeting, August 19th, 12:30. I always say if you can't make a membership meeting, you just have to remember three things. Always 12:30, always the third Saturday, always Pearson Center. So that's really it. I can't wait to see you all, and I welcome you to join us. Our website is naacplasvegas.org.
Awesome. Well, Quentin, thank you so much for joining the podcast, and thank you for the work that you're doing. I'm a member of the NAACP here, not just because I've been doing it for my entire life since I started in Michigan, where my pastor was also the president, but because of your leadership and because of the vision that you have for our community being inclusive, expansive, and you're revolutionary. And I'm just grateful to be able to say I know you.
Oh, you're the best. Thanks, Will. I appreciate that. That was really kind, my friend. Thank you.
Welcome. This has been Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. I'm Will Rucker, and as I always remind you, you are not just a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop, and what you do matters. So live compassionate. I'll see you next week.